Slade Cecconi delivered in his DBacks season debut. We'll talk about the good and the bad from the series against the San Francisco Giants and power rank the DBacks' biggest issues at this point of the season.
You are Locked On Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You're listening to who? The always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas. I'm a multimedia journalist and I'm a graphic designer. So please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. From brakes to exhaust kits and beyond, eBay Motors has over 122 million parts to keep your ride or die alive. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to bring home that big win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. Now, in today's Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, we'll talk about the DBacks tying the series against the San Francisco Giants. We'll talk about what went right, what went wrong in that series, and then we'll power rank a conversation I've been seeing a lot on DBacks Twitter the last few days, the biggest issues plaguing the DBacks up until this point of the season. So we'll talk about all that on today's Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. But first, want to say thank you for making Locked On Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners. Sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free. It's available on all platforms. So please continue to tell their friends. And one of those platforms is YouTube. So please hit subscribe to Locked On Diamondbacks on YouTube. We are trying to hit 2,000 subs by the All-Star break. That is our goal. So please hit subscribe to Locked On Diamondbacks on YouTube. But now let's get into the podcast and let's talk about the good and the bad from this series against the San Francisco Giants, because the DBacks, with their win on Sunday, were able to tie the Giants in this series. The DBacks are now 11-12 on the year. And with their win on Sunday, they actually move one game ahead of the Giants in the NL West division standing. So good job by the DBacks to keep pace with the rest of those teams in the division and, not go down 3 games to 4 to an NL West rival this early in the year. So good job by the DBacks on Sunday to tie up the series. And one of the big reasons that they were able to tie up the series is Slade Cecconi. So let's talk about the good and the bad from this weekend series against San Francisco Giants, because I want to start with that performance from Slade, because of course, Merrill Kelly, bad news from him. He was scratched the day of with some shoulder tightness or discomfort. It looks like he's going to get an MRI. We are waiting for the news on Merrill Kelly, praying for the best. He gets scratched on Sunday. Slade has to get the immediate call up and start, and you would not have known that he was not going to be prepared for this game, because Slade was absolutely phenomenal. And you can make the argument it was a top 3 start or better for any D-back starting pitcher this season. Super efficient by Slade. 6 innings, 2 hits, no walks, 2 earned runs, courtesy of a home run, 3 Ks, and only threw 64 pitches. Super efficient day for Slade. His fastball averaged around 94 to 95 miles per hour. It was really efficient. He didn't generate a ton of whiffs or swing and misses, but Slade, 4-pitch arsenal, fastball, slider, changeup, curveball, threw them all pretty evenly. Curveball was the least amount he threw, but he threw the fastball 28 times, slider 18 times, and the changeup 14 times. Just an overall really good start by Slade, and he has definitely earned himself another start in this rotation. If Merrill Kelly does have to go on the 10-day injury list or whatever, I would like Slade to continue to pitch in the rotation, especially with Ryan Nelson also being hurt as well. Tommy Henry could be called back up into the rotation pretty soon, but I think Slade is the main guy I want to see as the injury replacement over Tommy Henry right now. Let's say it's Zach Allen, Merrill Kelly, Brandon Fott, Jordan Montgomery in the rotation, and then that fifth spot is open with Ryan Nelson on the injured list or whatever. I would want Slade to be that number 5 starter over Tommy Henry with the way Slade looked in this performance on Sunday. Number 2 thing that was really positive from this weekend, Jordan Montgomery made his debut for the DBacks, and just like a Slade, you would not have known this was Jordan Montgomery's first start of the year because he was also super efficient in this game against San Francisco. 6 innings, 4 hits, 1 earned run, no walks, 3 Ks, 78 pitches. He was just mowing down Giants hitters left and right, working very quickly throughout that ball game. And it was just like Slade, a very impressive start. He threw his sinker most of the time, but like a Slade, his top 3 pitches, he all threw pretty efficiently and around the same amount of times because he threw that sinker 30 times, the curveball 24 times, and the changeup 20 times. He did throw his four-seamer 4 times, but like a Slade, those top 3 pitches, he tried to throw all around the same amount of times and keep it pretty balanced. The sinker was really effective. All the other pitchers were really effective. The only thing, velo down on his pitches compared to what it was last year, but I don't think we're too concerned with that, considering it was his first start of the year. At least for Slade, he was working in the minor leagues before this. I guess Jordan Montgomery was as well, but his ramp-up time was just so much shorter than these other pitchers in the organization. For him to come out game 1 and look that good against a pretty good San Francisco Giants team. Yes, I always clown on the offense for the Giants, but they know how to play against the Arizona Diamondbacks. Whenever it comes to an NL West rival, you kind of throw out the stats. So Jordan Montgomery, really good in his performance in his debut, and he makes me really excited for how he can look going forward. That's why I was so sad to see Merrill Kelly's injury, because it's like we just got Jordan Montgomery back, and now we're potentially losing Merrill Kelly. You gain one and then lose another. Very frustrating to see. Gabriel Moreno, he seems to be heating up with what he's done in his last 2 games. Gabby is someone that we know has struggled all season long in terms of his slugging and his OPS plus, but in his last 2 games, Gabriel Moreno was probably the heartbeat of this D-backs offense, because you look what he did in game number 2 in that 17-run outburst. Moreno, really important, 2 for 5, 2 runs scored, 3 RBIs. And then in Sunday's performance, Gabriel Moreno continued to keep the faucet on, 2 for 3, 2 RBIs and a hit. Seeing Moreno finally get going offensively, it's such a big positive for this lineup. He can be one of the best offensive catchers in baseball. We already know he's arguably the best defensive catcher in the sport, as we saw him gun down Jung Ho Lee in this game. But for him to go to another echelon in terms of the level of catcher we want him to be, we need more consistent offense from him, more slugging. In his last 2 games that he started, he looked really, really good at the plate, coming through late in clutch situations. So hopefully Moreno can continue heating up. Now for the negatives, Zach Allen, he really struggled in game number 2, by far his worst start of the season. 5 innings, 5 earned runs, gave up a couple home runs as well. Wasn't able to generate the swings and misses that we typically see from Zach Allen. We're not going to get too upset because, again, whenever you go against an NL West rival, those guys have seen you more than any other team in the sport. So it's not a complete surprise that the Giants were the team this season to get after Zach Gallen. It is something that we'll monitor going forward if he has another bad start, because I do think this season, even though the numbers were really good for Zach Gallen before this Giants start, I don't think he's looked elite this season. So we'll see if this is a trend that continues for Gallen, or if this was just a 1-game hiccup against a NL West rival that has had a ton of scouting against Gallen the last few years. Then the final thing I want to talk about from this weekend that was not a positive is something that I already touched on earlier, but the injuries continue to mount. As I said, Merrill Kelly scratched from his Sunday start with some discomfort in his shoulder. Blaze Alexander left the game in the 5th with some hamstring tightness. This D-backs team just continues to get battered. The health is an issue. but they are still right there in the thick of things in the NL West. And that is kind of what we have to hang our hats on and not get too discouraged when you look at the D-backs record of 11-12 and you see the fact that this D-backs team is super hurt right now. Even with all that being said, the D-backs are only, at the time of us recording this at 4:30 p.m. on a Sunday, a game and a half back of the division lead for the NL West. And the fact that you have all these injuries, once you get those guys back, once you get some things to even out with Corbin Carroll hopefully coming around and things like that, rotation getting healthy, like this D-backs team is currently a game and a half back with how bad they've looked late in games offensively and the bullpens at times. Like this team has been up and down all season, and they're still right there in the mix for the NL West division lead with a team that's not very healthy at all. I'm still very optimistic about this D-backs future. Best run differential in the NL West. So let's not get too low on ourselves. I know it's been a rocky season for the D-backs so far, but eventually they will get healthy. Eventually, I think Corbin Carroll will turn into an all-star player once again. So let's keep the optimism and the vibes up because the D-backs are still right there for the NL West division title. Now we'll talk about the biggest issues plaguing the D-backs this season in segment number 2. I first want to talk to you guys, though, about eBay Motors because passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride or die every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right. Let's get back to the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Let's talk about the biggest issues plaguing the D-backs this season because I've seen a lot of fun stuff on Twitter the last few days about what the biggest issue has been for the D-backs this season. Is it the bullpen? Is it the Jace Peterson playing time? So I'm coming out with my own power ranking of the biggest issues that I think have plagued the D-backs this season, the biggest things that have held this D-backs team from being the best versions of themselves at, 20-something games through 2024 at this point in the season. What has been the biggest issues for the D-backs? Let's power rank them right now on this podcast. We're going to start with number 1, and I got 8 here, so start at 1 and work our way to number 8. Number 1, how about just not having the full roster? I think that's by far the biggest issue that has held this D-backs team down so far this year. When you think about Merrill Kelly now being hurt, Erod out, Ryan Nelson out, Alec Thomas out, Perdomo out, Sewald out. You could even throw in Luis Frias, who hasn't been good this year, on the injured list. Jordan Lawler, he's been out in the minor leagues. Jorge Barosa, another death piece, has been out. Like, how about the fact that Randall Grichuk didn't start the year healthy? He was coming off injury and surgery as well. Like, this D-backs team just hasn't been able to put their full complement of guys together. And I feel like that's the biggest reason. If you're telling me right now, this rotation was Gallen, Kelly, with how Jordan Montgomery already looked through one start. Erod hasn't, of course, pitched at all this year, but I imagine he's probably better than Tommy Henry is at this point of their careers. And then Brandon Pfaadt is your number 5 starter. Like, that rotation, I think, obviously would be one of the best in baseball right now and would have lifted the D-backs to a lot better record than what it is right now. The D-backs bullpen has not always been great at closing games this year, and not in terms of the 9th inning, but just getting to the ninth inning has been a problem. But if you had Paul Sewald in the ninth and then everyone else was in their rightful spot, I think the bullpen would be a lot better too. Plus, it means one less guy in the bullpen that you probably don't trust, like a Luis Frias. He wouldn't have been there. A Perdomo, Blaze Alexander shortstop combination is way better as well. I mean, Perdomo from the left side, Blaze from the right side, maybe one of those guys spelling for Eugenio Suarez every now and then, who has been up and down offensively. Like, this team is just so much better if we had the full complement of roster pieces. But unfortunately, that isn't the case. But the fact, like I said earlier, the D-backs only a game and a half back with the amount of injuries that they currently have leads me to be very optimistic about the D-backs future as the season progresses. How about this? The second biggest issue, I think, for the D-backs this year has been their bullpen, which I think has been very shaky. Now, if you look at like bullpen ERA, the D-backs actually aren't that bad in the National League. The bullpen ERA would actually tell you that the D-backs have been kind of solid in that area sneakily this year, even though it doesn't feel like the D-backs bullpen has been that good. Right now, it's considered middle of the pack, 3.99 ERA. If you check this stat last week, it would have told you the D-backs had like a top 5 bullpen in the National League. They seem to be falling back just a little bit, but even the 3.99 feels higher than what it should be. It just feels like the D-backs bullpen hasn't been able to string together good performances with all the guys that come out in one appearance, if that makes sense. So it feels like we might have Ryan Thompson come in and pitch well, but then a guy like Cal Nelson or Joe Mansupply will come in right after them and suck. Or if you pitch Miguel Castro or Scott McGuff, we know those guys are going to give up runs. It feels like there's not enough bullpen arms in a singular game that could come out and have those shutdown innings. It feels like if you throw 3 to 4 bullpen arms out there, at least one of those guys is going to give up earned runs. Not enough starts where you give it to the bullpen and they have 3, 4 shutout innings. Feels like at least one reliever every game is going to give up earned runs. And that is just too big of an issue, especially if it's the Scott McGuffs, the Miguel Castros, or the Luis Frias of the world. Those guys haven't been good. And when those guys were good, when those guys have had good appearances, then it feels like the Mansupplis of the world struggle, or it feels like maybe a Bryce Jarvis, who has been really good recently, but maybe he gives up an earned run finally. Feels like we just don't have enough days where all the relievers are on the same page, and we know the relievers haven't been good. 7th, 8th inning, those guys have really struggled late and close in games, high leverage moments late in games. The 9th inning has been fine for the D-backs, but getting to the 9th inning has been a struggle. So I would say the bullpen has been the second biggest issue for this D-backs team this year. Eventually, they have to get off Miguel Castro and Scott McGuff because those guys have been so awful for this team this year. And Justin Martinez is already showing you he's a major upgrade over Luis Frias. So hopefully the D-backs can do the same with some upgrades over Castro and McGuff. The third biggest issue is the no answer backs. Last year, this offense was elite at coming back late in games. This year, the D-backs have not done that. When you look at their numbers, 7th inning, 8th inning, 9th inning, this D-backs offense completely falls off, especially when they're trailing. This D-backs team, their record is horrendous when they're down by at least 1 run after the 7th, after the 8th. The D-backs typically have not come back in those situations this year, and that has been a big problem. Last year, the D-backs were the comeback kids. This year, the D-backs offensively have not been clutch in late game situations, so that's another big area that they need to improve on. The bullpen late, the offense late game situations are a big issue for this D-backs team right now. The fourth biggest issue that I want to talk about before we wrap up segment number 2 is I think Corbin Carroll just not coming off his rookie season and capitalizing on it in his sophomore year. Carroll right now is just in a huge slump and has not looked good at all this year. You can tell every time he's at the plate, he just seems frustrated with himself whenever he pops it up. Whenever he strikes out, Carroll, you can just tell, is in his own head. And there's some concerning stuff at times with his mannerisms after swings and when he's going back to the dugout that we need to watch out for. Carroll on the season, 224 average, 327 OBP, and a 282 slugging. Carroll does have the 8 stolen bases on the year. He does have 12 walks to 13 strikeouts. Carroll's actually second on the team with 12 walks. So the fact that his OBP is under 300 with the second most walks on this team tells you how bad Corbin Carroll has been offensively this year. Excuse me, I was looking at the wrong OBP. Carroll, 327 OBP, 282 slugging. So a 327 OBP when you have the second most walks on the team, that OBP could be like 390 if Corbin Carroll was doing anything in terms of contact, anything in terms of power. That OBP could be a massive number. So Carroll doing a good job in terms of plate discipline, not striking out a ton, actually, only 13 Ks on the year. So when you actually look at the plate discipline, Carroll not striking out this year, drawing a ton of walks. He just can't put the ball in play, which has been a big issue for him. And I think when you talk about late game offense not coming in clutch, Carroll could be a main reason, because how many times has Carroll been up to the plate where runners in scoring position, been up to the plate in a clutch situation, and had just not converted this year? For the D-backs, late game offense to get better, we're going to need Corbin Carroll to get better. So I think Corbin Carroll not capitalizing year 2, looking like he's having a sophomore slump. I think that's the 4th biggest reason why the D-backs are only 11-12 to start the year. And so my top 4 right now: number 1, not having the full roster; number 2, the bullpen; number 3, not seeing the answer backs; number 4, Corbin Carroll not showing up. Those are my top 4 reasons as to why the D-backs are struggling in 2024. And if you want to hear my next 4 reasons, you're just going to have to wait until segment number 3. But first, I want to talk to you guys about this new game that I'm playing every single day called Monopoly Go. We've all been there, either as a player or a fan. It's halftime and the scoreboard is not looking good. You're feeling low, not sure you or your team can pull out a win. That's when you dig deep, lift your head up, and say to yourself, time to get back in the game. Pull off some bank heists and take as much of my friend's money as I possibly can. That's right, the smash hit mobile game, Monopoly Go, lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but on your phone, anytime, with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies. There's so much to do. Play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards, make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball, charge other players rent for your iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests and in tournaments to get extra rewards and climb the leaderboard. So get back out there, put on your game face, and download Monopoly Go, now for free on the App Store or Google Play. And don't forget, the best place to place any wagers on the D-backs is going to be FanDuel, because it's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball season is in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. My favorite thing to do on the FanDuel app is the same game parlay. Whenever the D-backs are playing, I take the D-backs money line. Give me Ketel Marte over on total bases, and give me Blaze Alexander over on total bases. If that 3 legs pays out at plus 400, I'm smashing that. And if you want to smash that, what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockdown and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right. Let's get back into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast. Let's talk about my final 4 reasons, or my final 4 biggest issues that I think have plagued the D-backs in 2024. Again, this is a exercise that was brought on by the D-back Twitter community because there's been a hot debate over Is Jace Peterson the biggest issue to the D-backs this season? Where would that rank? How would you rank all the D-backs issues this year? So I'm doing my own power ranking. Number 1 was not the full roster. Number 2 was the bullpen. Number 3 was late game offense. Number 4 is Corbin Carroll not showing up. Number 5, Torey Lovullo and his decision making when it comes to playing bad players. And this is where you could talk about Jace Peterson, because Jace Peterson, for me, and his playing time would fall on number 5, because I do think having a guy out there who is just not effective at all, who is basically an automatic out, definitely hurts your team. I mean, Jace Peterson was 1 for 22 this year. He has been one of the worst players in D-backs franchise history. He's been one of the worst players in Major League Baseball. Negative 41 OPS plus. Jace Peterson, even going back to last year, was a non-factor for the D-backs when he batted 183 in the second half of the year. So if you just look at Jace Peterson's stats during his time with the D-backs, he has a 157 average. He's 18 for 115. He has 0 home runs. He has a 469 OBP. He has a 31 OPS plus. Excuse me, a 469 OPS, not OBP. 469 OPS, 31 OPS plus. Jace Peterson has been one of the least productive players in D-backs franchise history, and he's been one of the least productive players in Major League Baseball. And the fact that Torey Lovullo has tried to get him into as many games as possible, 14 games this year. It's actually disgusting that's that many. It's disgusting that Torey Lovullo even felt like he needed to get Jace Peterson into the game. I get it. You don't want to get to the postseason and be like, all right, I need a pinch hit at bat. Let me throw in Jace Peterson, who hasn't played all year. But guess what? If there's any situation that calls for a Jace Peterson at bat, you probably already lost that situation. So Jace Peterson should have never been on this D-backs team. There are clearly better guys than him. Even if you go to the minor leagues, like, I don't care. I don't think he's in Reno right now, Buddy Kennedy, but even someone of that level, I would have taken over a Jace Peterson. I don't care. You could really throw out anyone from the minor leagues. I would take them all over a Jace Peterson right now. So glad to see that he's gone. And this also, this topic, Torey Lovullo's decision making with the bad players, also goes to how he utilizes the bullpen. The days where he throws out Scott McGough and Miguel Castro the same day, especially when it's like those 1-run ball games. Like, do you not expect us to win? Like, anytime he throws out Castro or McGough in a big situation, I feel like the D-backs are going to lose, especially if you're down. Like, the best way to utilize those guys, if you are going to pitch them, the D-backs have to either be up a lot or the D-backs have to be up a little bit, but it has to be early in the game. It has to be like the 5th or 6th inning, D-backs up a run or two. Stop throwing those guys out in big, high leverage 7th inning, 8th inning situations. Just don't do it. The McGuffs, the Castros, they've been bad. Also, Torey Lovullo at times, like, he'll do these weird things. We know he loves the platoon things, like Jace Peterson over Blaze Alexander at times. We've seen Pavin Smith already getting at bats just because he had to be called up. And if there's going to be a righty on the mound, then why not get Pavin Smith in a bat against a righty, being a left-hand batter? Like, there's just too many times Torey Lovullo has played into the platoon situations this year. Remember that Yankees game? How do we end up with a pitcher and Scott McGough as the last batter with the bases loaded? There's just been too many times with Torey Lovullo and his decision-making in terms of who should be playing in the lineup, who should be coming out the pen. I just feel like Torey Lovullo, he's a player's manager. So at times he wants to get those guys who are struggling going, but he gets married to guys way too long. You should not be giving Jace Peterson at bats. You should not be giving Pavin Smith at bats. Limit the Castros and McGuff's use as much as possible. Torey, I get it, being a player guy, he wants to make sure everyone gets a chance, but sometimes he hurts this team by playing guys who are just not good way too much. Number 6, the mental mistakes by the D-backs team has really costed them this year. The defense, the base running. Blaze Alexander has a few errors. His outs above average is like not very good this year. Suarez has a few errors. This D-backs team on the season, I think, has like 14 or 16 errors. Like, has been a problem. And also the base running. Corbin Carroll has been caught stealing a couple times. So has Jake McCarthy. How many times have we seen guys get doubled off or picked off on the bases? Like, the mental mistakes by this D-backs team has not been good. They have not been as smart of a team as they were last year when it comes to just playing smart baseball. And so we need to see them just get more technically sound and fundamentally better. Some of that will be better once you get like Alec Thomas in center field and Geraldo Perdomo at shortstop. Until then, we need guys like Blaze Alexander to get better defensively. And one way for him to get better defensively is for him to play every single day and not get sat for the Jace Petersons of the world, which is not going to happen any longer. Number 7 for me, the lack of power from Eugenio Suarez. He's come through with runners scoring position, and he's come through with his defense. That's why he's only number 7 for me. If he wasn't as good this year with runners scoring position, he would be a lot higher on this list. Suarez is someone that we haven't seen a ton of power from this year. 2 home runs, 346 slugging percentage. So we need to see more from Suarez from that power department because it's the main reason that the D-backs acquired him. And then the final thing that has held the D-backs back this season is Gabriel Moreno's lack of production from his slugging and power standpoint as well, because he has 0 home runs on the season and his slugging is not where it needs to be. Moreno is someone that can be a very good offensive catcher. We know about his contact ability. He is someone that batted 3rd for the D-backs last year in the postseason because when he's right, he can be a really good offensive contributor like we've seen the last 2 games he started this year. Moreno, hopefully that's a trend that we see continue to happen, because if he can become and enter that next level of offensive catcher, Moreno could be a top 5 catcher in Major League Baseball, one of the biggest difference makers and swing pieces for a squad with what he could do with his bat and his glove. So Moreno need his bat to get going just a little bit more and continue to build off what he did against the San Francisco Giants. Now that's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Come back tomorrow for more Diamondbacks news coverage and insight. We'll be talking about that series against the St. Louis Cardinals. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. Deuces.